In response to pro-Palestine's protests at several UW campuses, a Republican state representative is putting pen to paper. Nate Gustafson of Fox Crossing sent a letter to Jay Rothman. He is the president of the Universities of Wisconsin. It read in part, quote, "Not only do these illegal demonstrations create a hostile environment as well as a safety concern for your Jewish students and their allies, it also prevents finals and finals prep from happening smoothly as you've had state paid teachers walk out in protest. As an elected official, I have received many concerns from my constituents about the actions of the students in your care as well as the tantrum by your staff. I urge you to keep your students safe and dismiss the staff that choose not to do their job," end quote. As we have reported, students at UW Oshkosh, Milwaukee, and Madison have protested Israel's war in Gaza. These demonstrations began with students at the University of Columbia in New York who set up an over 2-week-long encampment at their college. Students nationwide are demanding their schools divest from Israel and any companies that do business with them, aiding in their war. Several commencement ceremonies across the country have been canceled due to the escalating protests.